I had always thought trust was simple. You love someone, you care for them, you communicate, and everything else falls into place. At least, that's what I believed until Lena's birthday party incident forced me to realize that trust is fragile, delicate, and easily shaken, even without betrayal. I'm 29, she's 27, and we had been together for 10 months. It wasn't a long time, not compared to marriages or decade-long relationships, but it was enough time to feel grounded. We had laughed, argued, shared our pasts, and even discussed moving in together the following year. In the day-to-day, things felt effortless. At least, that's how it seemed until one weekend, everything shifted without warning. It started innocuously enough. Lena told me she was going out with some friends from college on a Saturday night. I didn't mind. I had plans to watch a game with my brother. I thought nothing of it. We exchanged casual goodbyes. She left, and the evening went as expected. The next day, my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. I scrolled, distractedly, until I saw a story from one of her friends. A photo of a group of people, smiling. In the caption, someone wrote, "Happy birthday, Jason." My heart skipped. I recognized the name immediately. Jason was Lena's ex, someone she had dated for 3 years. They had broken up a little over a year before Lena and I met. From what I knew, they had been serious. From what Lena had said, they were on good terms, friendly, casual, but not close. That was enough to make me pause. I waited until she came home to bring it up. Calmly, I asked, "Were you at Jason's birthday?" She looked surprised, almost as if she hadn't considered that I might notice. Then she said yes, quickly adding that it wasn't a big deal, just a group gathering, and she hadn't thought it mattered. Her words were calm, but the tone felt hollow to me. It wasn't about jealousy. I wasn't accusing her of cheating. It was the omission, the choice not to mention it until I discovered it through social media. That felt deliberate. That felt like something had been hidden. And even though she said she didn't think I would care, the sensation of being left out, of being intentionally sidelined, dug into me. I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just expressed that I would have appreciated knowing beforehand. She got defensive, saying I was overreacting, that she hadn't hidden it. But in that moment, I knew what hiding felt like. It was in the absence of transparency, in the unspoken choice to let the truth remain obscured. It was a decision she had made, perhaps small, but impactful. The evening was tense. We didn't fight outright, but the air between us shifted. She said she didn't want to make it a big deal. I nodded, understanding, but my gut told me this was more than just a minor oversight. It wasn't the party. It was how she handled it. How she dismissed my feelings. How she prioritized her comfort over honesty. Over the following days, things didn't improve. Awkward conversations popped up. She insisted I was overthinking. I tried to let it go, but the feeling of unease lingered, persistent. Every interaction carried a subtle tension, a reminder that we might not align in our expectations of trust and communication. 10 days later, I realized something critical. Lena hadn't lied in the traditional sense, but the intent to obscure the truth was there. She admitted she hadn't told me about the party because she knew how I would react. That confirmation struck me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about secrecy, it was about the fundamental difference in how we approached honesty in a relationship. She felt the need to manipulate the situation to avoid conflict. I felt the need to be treated as an equal partner, deserving of transparency. We didn't argue. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches. Instead, there was a quiet, mutual understanding that forcing the relationship forward would only create more harm. We separated not with anger, but with the recognition that our values did not align. Looking back, I realized this wasn't a failure of affection. Lena and I cared for each other deeply, but love alone is not enough. Trust and communication are the frameworks that allow love to endure. Without them, even the best intentions can crumble under the weight of withheld truths. The experience left a mark, yes, but it also taught me something invaluable. I learned to recognize the subtle signs of misalignment, to honor my instincts, and to understand that uneasy feelings in a relationship are not to be dismissed lightly. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and for someone you care about, is to step away before the erosion becomes irreparable. It was unfortunate. It hurt. But I walked away knowing I had respected myself, honored my feelings, and refused to compromise my boundaries for comfort. That awareness became a foundation for how I approached all future relationships, a reminder that transparency and honesty are not optional. They are essential. And that is a lesson worth every ache, every sleepless night, and every moment of quiet reflection. I had always dreamed of having a home that felt entirely mine. Not just a space to live, but a place where I could express myself freely, creatively, without rules or judgments. When I finally bought my house, a modest place in a quiet neighborhood, I knew I had found that freedom. There was no homeowners association, no committee dictating what shades we could use or how our gardens should look. It was liberating, the kind of autonomy that made every morning feel like a blank canvas. I had a vision in mind. Soft, playful, and welcoming. I wanted my house to feel like it invited people in, like it reflected joy in the same way a warm smile can. I chose a soft peach color for the walls, with accents of sage blue and muted pink to highlight architectural details. Every choice felt intentional. Every color and shade carefully considered to reflect light, warmth, and personality. My yard was an extension of that vision, wildflowers swaying freely, sunflowers towering proudly, garden flags fluttering in gentle arcs, and a small little free library where neighbors could exchange books. I imagined children running up to pick out a story, a feeling of community threaded through something as simple as a shared book. But, of course, not everyone appreciated my vision. Paul, my neighbor, had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years, long before I moved in. He had an air of permanence about him, a sense that his way of seeing the world was the only correct one. He didn't want wildflowers. He didn't want pink accents. He didn't want creativity, whimsy, or anything that might hint at joy over order. His idea of a house was neutral, beige, and safe. Color, to him, was a challenge, a threat to the monotony he had built around himself. The complaints started immediately. Every time a new brushstroke of color appeared, Paul had an opinion. Every new plant or whimsical decoration earned a glare. He stopped by more frequently than was necessary, often leaning against the fence, arms crossed, frowning as if the world had wronged him personally. I tried to be polite. I smiled. I nodded. I reminded myself that people are entitled to opinions, even when those opinions feel unfair. But over time, the constant judgment began to feel suffocating. My space, my sanctuary, was being invaded, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, by someone who refused to accept difference. One weekend, I decided to paint custom pavers with my niece. She was 15, full of excitement and imagination, and she loved the idea of leaving our mark on the yard. We painted turtles, ladybugs, birds, and other cheerful designs, each stroke a testament to creativity, patience, and joy. I imagined the pathway welcoming anyone who walked by, a small burst of happiness in an ordinary day. But before we had even finished, Paul appeared. He leaned over the fence, arms crossed, his face a mixture of irritation and disbelief. "What are you doing now?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. I smiled faintly, hoping to diffuse the tension. "We're painting pavers. My niece and I thought it would be fun." He shook his head, muttering about eyesores and disrespect, as though the entire concept of joy were offensive. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wanted to respond calmly, to assert my boundaries without creating unnecessary conflict. And so I said, "Paul, it's time for you to grow up and get over what I'm doing with my house." The words surprised even me. I hadn't intended to be confrontational, but they felt necessary. I couldn't continue bending to his disapproval. He sputtered, incredulous. He told me I had no right to speak to him that way, that I was being disrespectful. I told him simply, "Go away, get a life." If he had so much energy to complain about a house color or a few painted pavers, perhaps he needed a hobby or a distraction. He stormed off, muttering under his breath, leaving me with my niece, who was quietly giggling at the spectacle. It wasn't the first time I'd defended my choices. It wouldn't be the last. Over time, I came to understand something important. The people who feel compelled to control others are rarely happy themselves. Paul wasn't angry because of me. He was angry because he had convinced himself that joy and color were threats, that someone else's happiness somehow diminished his, and no amount of explanation or politeness would change that. My only option was to be unapologetic, to hold my ground while maintaining my own peace. The days that followed were a mix of minor victories and quiet irritations. I continued decorating, painting, planting. The house became exactly what I wanted it to be: bright, welcoming, alive with energy and creativity. Neighbors who appreciated whimsy stopped by occasionally, leaving small gifts of encouragement or sharing stories of their own gardens. Their smiles reminded me that not everyone measures life by sameness or order. Some people see beauty where others see chaos, and that is enough. Paul continued to grumble. He would shake his head when passing, comment under his breath, and occasionally send long-winded complaints to other neighbors. But I had grown used to it. I had learned that standing up for myself and my home did not make me the antagonist. It made me the steward of my own space, the curator of my own happiness. And nothing anyone else could say or do would change that. Sometimes, at night, I would walk through the yard, barefoot, tracing my hands along the edges of the stone walls I had built around the wheat fields I planted. The stacked stones reminded me of places I had seen in pictures of Scotland and Ireland, the kind of quiet, solid beauty that existed for centuries without apology. I thought about my niece, about our painted pavers, and I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was mine. Entirely mine. Joyful, chaotic, alive, and unapologetic. It wasn't just about colors or pavers. It was about claiming space in the world without fear. About recognizing that boundaries are necessary, that personal expression is not negotiable, and that there are people in life whose opinions, no matter how loudly expressed, do not define you. The house became a lesson in resilience. Each flower, each painted stone, each laugh echoed through the yard as a reminder that joy is not optional and that standing firm in one's values is not selfish. It is survival. And so, every morning, I wake, make coffee, and step onto the porch. The sun falls softly on the painted walls, the wildflowers swaying in the gentle breeze. Children run along the path, stopping to pick a flower or read a book from the little library. The laughter, the light, the simple, unremarkable happiness feels like victory. Not over Paul, not over anyone else, but over the fear of being unseen, unheard, or diminished. I learned, in a quiet and profound way, that the beauty of life is not measured by the absence of opposition. It is measured by the courage to live authentically, unapologetically, and without fear. Paul may never understand. He may never appreciate it. But I do. My home is mine, my joy is mine, and in that, I am entirely free. I used to think I was unlucky. That was the easiest explanation. Some people just draw the short straw over and over again, right? Jobs didn't stick, managers turned cold, customers complained, and somehow I always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. At first, it felt random. Then it felt cruel. And eventually, it felt personal in a way I couldn't explain. I'm 24 now, but this all started a few years ago, right after I finished my education. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't careless. If anything, I was desperate to prove myself. I took whatever work I could find: cafes, bookstores, libraries, tutoring gigs, grocery stores. Sometimes I worked 2 jobs at once. I told myself I was building experience, expanding my resume, learning how the real world worked. Most of the jobs followed the same pattern. The first few weeks would be fine. I'd learn the routines, get along with co-workers, maybe even feel like I was finally settling in. Then something strange would happen. A customer would complain about me, but the complaint wouldn't match anything I remembered doing. A review would appear online describing an employee who sounded suspiciously like me, accusing me of behavior I'd never engaged in. Once, a manager pulled me aside and asked why I'd accessed inappropriate websites using the staff Wi-Fi, something I absolutely had not done. I defended myself every time. Sometimes they believed me, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes it didn't matter. I'd be let go quietly, or my hours would be cut until quitting felt inevitable. The shortest job lasted less than 3 weeks. The longest didn't even make it to a year. Each time, I told myself it was just bad luck. Each time, I swallowed the humiliation and applied somewhere new. And every time, my girlfriend was there for me. Her name was Janice. She was 5 years older than me, confident in a way I admired, calm when I was anxious. We'd been together for over 2 years. She knew everything, every firing, every awkward meeting, every moment I came home feeling hollow and embarrassed. She held me while I spiraled. She reassured me that none of it defined me. She told me I was smart, capable, and unlucky in a way that would eventually pass. I believed her because I needed to. By the time I started working part-time at a small neighborhood bakery, I was already exhausted. Not physically, mentally. I'd learned to expect the worst even when things were going well. Still, the bakery felt different. The staff was small. The owner-manager seemed kind. I told myself this one would last. For over 2 months, nothing went wrong. Then one afternoon, my manager asked to speak with me in her office. She didn't look angry, just uncomfortable. She showed me a printed Google review. Someone had written a long, detailed complaint about an employee who was rude, inappropriate, and unprofessional. The description matched my shift almost perfectly. On that day, I'd been the only one working. I felt my stomach drop, but I didn't panic the way I used to. I explained, calmly, that this had happened before. That someone seemed to have it out for me. That the accusations didn't reflect my behavior at all. To my surprise, she believed me. She told me she'd dismissed the review and thanked me for being upfront. I went home shaken, but relieved. For once, nothing had exploded. I didn't tell Janice about it. That should have been my first real warning sign, the fact that I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I was tired of sounding broken. I wanted one normal evening. We talked about dinner, about her day, about nothing important. Later that night, she left the room to shower. Her phone was on the table. It buzzed. I wasn't snooping. I swear that. The screen lit up, and I couldn't help but see it. A notification from Google. Something about a manager responding to a review. The username attached to the review response was unmistakable. It was the same strange name I'd seen earlier that day. My heart didn't race. It sank. Like something inside me had finally snapped into place. I didn't confront her. I didn't say anything at all. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions. That there had to be another explanation. That paranoia had been eating at me for too long, and I couldn't let it ruin the one stable thing I had left. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew heavier with every passing hour. 2 days later, I told her I needed to book a train ticket to visit my father. She offered to let me use her account. When she went to shower, I opened her email. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't not look. It didn't take long. There was an email she'd sent to herself. Attached was a spreadsheet. I opened it. I still remember the way my hands felt, cold and numb, like they didn't belong to me anymore. The spreadsheet contained my entire life. Every job I'd ever had. Every workplace email. Passwords. Shift schedules. Names and phone numbers of co-workers. Notes about which managers were easiest to contact. Fake accounts linked to complaint platforms. Email templates. Timelines. It wasn't chaos. It was organized. Efficient. Methodical. This hadn't been impulsive. It had been planned. I sent the file to myself. I took screenshots. I printed it out. I don't remember deciding to do those things, I just did them, like muscle memory taking over when your brain can't cope. When Janice left for work, I packed. I didn't take anything sentimental. Just essentials. Clothes. Documents. My laptop. I felt like I was being watched even though she wasn't there. Like the walls knew what I'd discovered. I called my boss and said I needed time off. I didn't explain. I didn't have the words. Then I went to my dad's. The moment I walked into his house, I broke. I cried in a way I hadn't since I was a child, deep, uncontrollable sobs that left me gasping. He didn't ask questions at first. He just let me fall apart. Over the next few days, he helped me piece together what to do. Police. A lawyer. A therapist. I slept on the couch because I couldn't stand the thought of being alone in a room with a door that locked. Janice tried to contact me. I didn't respond. Eventually, I sent one message. It was short. Final. I told her it was over. That I knew what she'd done. My father handled the rest. The legal process was slow and terrifying. Every email notification made my chest tighten. Every unfamiliar number felt like a threat. I changed every password, deleted accounts, locked down my digital footprint until it felt like I barely existed online at all. In the end, we didn't go to court. Some people think that means she won. It doesn't feel that way to me. I couldn't survive a public trial. I could barely survive knowing what she'd done. Watching her face consequences wouldn't have erased the damage, it would have stretched it out, kept me trapped in it longer. Instead, everything was settled privately. I moved. I found a stable job under tighter security. I stayed in therapy. Slowly, painfully, I learned how to trust my own reality again. It's been years now. I still get anxious when something goes wrong at work. I still keep my accounts private. I still flinch at unexpected emails. But I haven't had a panic attack in months. I sleep through most nights. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about me. If she knows this story exists out there somewhere. But it doesn't matter. What matters is this: I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't broken. I wasn't incompetent. I was being sabotaged by the person who told me she loved me. I used to think birthdays were silly. Just another day on the calendar, another excuse to feel older. That was before I learned how much they can hurt when the people you love treat them like they don't matter. I turned 21 on a Sunday. That detail matters more than it should, because it meant there were no work excuses, no late shifts, no unavoidable obligations. Just a day that existed quietly, waiting to be acknowledged. My boyfriend and I had been together for almost 3 years. We met when we were young and figuring ourselves out, and in a lot of ways we grew up together. He lived with his mom. He'd dropped out of school. I was still studying, still trying to build something stable for myself. We talked often about moving in together someday, about the future, about how things would be better once everything settled. Birthdays mattered to me. He knew that. I'd told him more than once. Not in a demanding way, not with expectations of extravagance, just with honesty. I liked feeling remembered, chosen. I liked knowing that once a year, someone paused their world to acknowledge mine. For his birthdays, I always tried. I saved money. I baked cakes from scratch even when they came out a little uneven. I wrote cards that took me hours to finish because I wanted the words to be right. I didn't do it because I expected something in return. I did it because I loved him. The first year, he was great. Thoughtful. Present. It felt balanced. The second year, we celebrated my birthday late. He said he was tired from work. I told myself it was fine. People get tired. Life happens. I swallowed the disappointment and moved on. This year was different. I turned 21. That felt big to me. Not because of alcohol or legality or anything like that, but because it felt like a threshold. Like stepping into adulthood with intention. I bought a new dress weeks in advance, a soft pink one I'd been saving for, imagining how it would feel to wear it out to dinner, maybe take a photo together, something simple but meaningful. All week, I talked about my birthday. Casually. Lightly. My birthday's coming up. I can't believe I'll be 21. He nodded. Smiled. Acted like he heard me. Sunday afternoon, I texted him to confirm our plans. Nothing elaborate. Just checking in. That's when the tone shifted. He replied vaguely. Then defensively. Then dismissively. He told me he'd already made plans. He said he didn't think it was a big deal. He suggested we celebrate another day, like last year. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of it. I reminded him that it was my birthday. That I thought we were doing something together. He told me I was overreacting. That I should be grateful he was even willing to reschedule. The words stung more than I expected. I asked why he hadn't told me earlier. He said he forgot, even though I'd mentioned it all week. Then he went out. I stayed home. I changed into the dress anyway, even though there was nowhere to go. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, trying to convince myself I looked silly for caring this much. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I was too old to feel this hurt over a single day. But the silence was loud. I spent my 21st birthday alone in my room, scrolling through messages from friends who assumed I was out celebrating. I didn't correct them. I didn't want to explain. My boyfriend didn't text. The next day, he suggested we celebrate properly later. He said I owed him an apology for being ungrateful. Something in me cracked. It wasn't just about the birthday. It was about the pattern. About how my feelings always seemed negotiable, something to be postponed or minimized as long as it was convenient for him. About how effort flowed one way. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think. To feel without being told how to feel. When I finally did respond, it turned into a long conversation. Messages back and forth that spiraled into something ugly. He accused me of guilt-tripping him. I told him I felt invisible. He told me I was too sensitive. I told him I felt taken for granted. He apologized, but the apology felt hollow. Like something he'd learned to say without changing anything. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying our entire relationship in my head. The good moments. The laughter. The comfort. And then the moments where I'd shrunk myself to keep the peace. I realized something terrifying. If this was how he treated something he knew mattered to me, how would he treat bigger things later on? The next evening, I told him I needed to talk. I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head a dozen times. I thought it would break me. It didn't. I told him I couldn't keep doing this. That I needed a partner who showed up without being reminded. Who didn't treat my needs like inconveniences. Who didn't make me feel guilty for wanting to be celebrated. He was shocked. Angry. Then sad. Then desperate. He sent messages I didn't have the energy to answer. Long paragraphs about how he loved me, how he'd change, how he couldn't imagine life without me. Reading them hurt, but they didn't move me the way they once would have. Because love shouldn't require begging for effort. We broke up. I cried for days afterward, not because I doubted the decision, but because letting go of someone you planned a future with always hurts, even when it's necessary. Looking back now, I don't think he was a bad person. I think he was immature, comfortable, unwilling to grow at the same pace I was growing. My 21st birthday didn't look the way I imagined. There was no dinner, no photos, no candlelit moment. But it gave me something else. Clarity. Sometimes the most important gift you receive isn't wrapped, isn't planned, isn't even wanted at first. Sometimes it's the quiet realization that you deserve more than half-effort love. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. I never thought a late-night walk could change the way I see the world, but what happened that night still lingers in my mind, the kind of memory that sticks like a shadow at the edge of your vision. I think I need to get it off my chest, so I'm writing it here, hoping that sharing it might somehow make it feel less real. It was just past midnight when I decided to take a walk. I had been cooped up in my apartment all evening, trying to distract myself from the kind of thoughts that spiral too quickly if left alone. My city is quiet at night, almost eerily so, except for the occasional hum of a distant car or the scrape of wind against the pavement. I wrapped myself in a thick jacket, pulled my scarf tight around my neck, and stepped outside. The street was almost empty, save for the flickering street lamps that lined the sidewalk like tired sentinels. I had walked this route hundreds of times, yet that night, everything felt off. The air was colder than usual, but it wasn't the cold that made me uneasy, it was the feeling that I wasn't entirely alone. I brushed it off as paranoia and started walking faster, my footsteps echoing in the empty street. About 10 minutes into my walk, I noticed something strange. In the distance, just beyond the pool of light from a street lamp, a figure stood perfectly still. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but as I got closer, I could make out the shape of a person, or something that looked like a person. They were wearing a long coat, their hands shoved deep into their pockets, and they were staring straight at me. I slowed down. My heart was beating faster, a drum in my chest. Something about the figure didn't feel right. There was no hat, no hair visible, just the faint outline of a head and shoulders. I told myself it was someone waiting for a friend, or maybe just standing there for some reason I couldn't see. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my footsteps, to tell myself I was imagining things. Then, the figure moved. Not a full step, just a tilt, a shift that made my stomach knot. I realized then that they had been moving in some way all along, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a shadow stretching toward me. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I tried to pass by without looking directly at them, my eyes fixed on the cracked pavement, but when I glanced up, the figure was closer. I picked up my pace, my scarf tightening uncomfortably around my neck. The street seemed to stretch longer than it should have, the shadows deeper, darker. I could feel the weight of someone, or something, behind me, moving in time with my steps. My brain screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if the pavement itself was holding me down. Then I heard it, a sound so faint, I thought I was imagining it. Footsteps. Not mine, not echoing like mine, but soft, deliberate, keeping pace exactly with me. I spun around, but the street behind me was empty. No one there. Only the distant hum of the city and the flickering street lamps. I kept walking, faster now, but the footsteps continued, shadowing mine perfectly. Panic started to rise in my chest, a thick, suffocating weight. I wanted to call someone, but my phone was in my bag, tucked away, and I couldn't reach it fast enough. I told myself I was imagining things. It had to be some coincidence, some weird trick of sound and shadow. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. I turned onto a narrower street, thinking maybe I could lose them in the maze of alleys and side streets I knew so well. That's when I saw it, an apartment window, on the second floor of a building I passed every day that had always been dark. And now, a faint light glowed from within. But the light wasn't steady, it pulsed, like a heartbeat, and every time it did, I thought I could see a figure moving behind the curtain, watching me. I froze. The figure in the window moved closer, pressing something against the glass. A hand. A face. I couldn't tell. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my legs refused. Then I felt it, a presence, not behind me this time, but right next to me. My body went cold, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. And then, a voice. Soft, almost too soft to hear, whispering directly into my ear. You shouldn't be here. I bolted. Every muscle in my body screamed as I ran, twisting through the streets I knew like the back of my hand, praying the sound of my own footsteps would drown out whatever was following me. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment building, heart hammering, lungs burning, my jacket soaked in sweat. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, gasping, trying to convince myself it had been my imagination. It wasn't. Because the next morning, when I went to check the window I had passed, the light was gone. The apartment was empty, as if it had never been occupied. I asked my neighbors about it, but they insisted no one had lived there for months. No one had. I've tried to rationalize it, really. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was hallucinating after staying up too late. But I've walked those streets countless times since, late at night, and I never see that figure again. I've never heard the footsteps again. But sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I swear I can hear a faint whisper, soft and deliberate, telling me, again, that I shouldn't be here. It's a strange thing, the kind of fear that doesn't attack your senses all at once but lingers, lingering at the edge of perception, like a shadow in the corner of a room. I still walk at night, sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself I'm not crazy. Or maybe I like the feeling of something watching, waiting, just out of reach, reminding me how small and fragile we really are. I don't know if anyone will read this, or if anyone even cares, but I had to tell someone. It's been months, and I still think about it almost every night. I've learned to notice shadows a little more carefully, to listen to the rhythm of footsteps that aren't mine, and to respect the quiet spaces where the world seems to hold its breath. Some things are better left unseen, some things are better left alone. But some nights, when the city is quiet and the street lamps flicker just right, I can't help but wonder if I'll see that figure again. And if I do, will I be ready? I started noticing the emails after I took a new job working from home. At first, I assumed they were spam, automated messages, glitches, the kind of thing you delete without thinking. But then I realized something that made my stomach drop. They were being sent from my own email address. The first one arrived at 1:09 a.m. The subject line was blank. The body contained a single sentence. You left the bedroom light on. I was sitting in my bedroom when I read it. The light was on. I stared at the screen, then slowly looked up at the lamp beside my bed, half expecting it to turn off on its own. It didn't. I laughed it off, nervous and confused, and told myself it was some kind of spoofed email. A prank. Maybe malware. I changed my password immediately. The next night, another email arrived. You lock the door twice now. That's new. My heart started pounding. I do lock the door twice. Always have. It's a habit I picked up years ago. I don't remember telling anyone about it. I checked the sender information, the IP addresses, the login activity. Nothing unusual. No sign of unauthorized access. The emails were legitimately sent from my account, but not from any device I owned. The third email came while I was in the kitchen making coffee. You're standing very still. I froze. My hands were gripping the edge of the counter. I hadn't moved in several seconds. Slowly, I turned in a full circle, scanning the apartment. Everything looked normal. The door was locked. The windows were closed. The hallway outside was empty. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend that night. The emails continued anyway. You sleep on your side when you're scared. You stopped breathing for 7 seconds last night. You should get more rest. I stopped opening them. I set up filters, blocked my own address, reported it to my provider. It didn't matter. The emails still came, and I could still feel them, even unread, sitting in my inbox like something alive. Then one morning, I woke up to an email that hadn't been sent during the night. It had been sent 30 seconds ago. Look behind you. I dropped my phone and spun around. Nothing. I started checking my apartment obsessively. I bought new locks, covered the webcam, put tape over every sensor I could find. I unplugged everything that didn't need to be connected to the internet. Still, the emails kept coming. They started correcting me. You didn't check the closet. That wasn't the right window. You missed something. I stopped sleeping. Every sound felt deliberate. Every shadow felt wrong. The apartment no longer felt like a place I lived. It felt like a place I was being observed from. One night, I received an email that was longer than the rest. You keep trying to find me in the wrong places. I'm not hiding. I'm not watching you from outside. I'm already where you are. I felt cold all over. I typed a reply before I could stop myself. What do you want? The response came instantly. To make sure you don't forget me. That night, I dreamed I was sitting at my computer, typing an email. I couldn't see the screen clearly, but I knew what I was writing. When I woke up, my laptop was open. An email draft sat on the screen. The cursor blinked at the end of a sentence I don't remember typing. I see you too. I don't live in that apartment anymore. I deleted the email account. I changed jobs. I moved cities. But sometimes, when I'm tired, when I zone out staring at my screen, my fingers start typing on their own. And for just a moment, I feel like I'm not alone in my head anymore. I started house-sitting for my aunt while she was away for a few months. She lived in a small, isolated town where the streets emptied after sunset and most of the houses looked like they hadn't been updated since the 80s. Her place sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, backed up against a thin line of woods. I'd visited before, but living there alone felt different. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where every sound feels intentional. The first few nights were uneventful. I fell into a routine. Lock the doors, check the windows, turn off the lights, go to bed. Around midnight, the house would settle with soft pops and creaks, nothing unusual. I slept fine. The fifth night is when I heard the knock. It came from the front door. 3 slow taps. Not loud, not urgent. Just deliberate. I checked the time, 2:34 a.m. I didn't answer. I stayed still, listening. After about 10 seconds, I heard footsteps on the porch, slow and heavy, moving away from the door. I peeked through the curtains. The porch was empty. No car, no silhouette, no movement beyond the weak glow of the porch light. The next night, It happened again. Same time. Same 3 knocks. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? Someone knocked and left. I convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe some local kids testing houses late at night. On the 3rd night, the knock came from the back door. I froze in bed, heart pounding. The back door faced the woods. There was no porch there, just a small concrete step and darkness beyond it. The knock was slower this time, heavier. I didn't move. After the knocking stopped, I heard something else. Footsteps. Not retreating. Circling the house. Slow crunches on gravel. Pausing occasionally, like whoever it was stopping to listen. I pulled the covers up to my chin and stayed perfectly still until the sounds faded. The next morning, I found muddy footprints outside every door. Front, back, even beneath the windows. Bare footprints. Large. Too large to be a child's. I called my aunt and told her what happened. She laughed it off, said the town had always been strange, and suggested I stop watching scary videos before bed. The knocks continued. Every night. Always around 2:30 a.m. Sometimes at the front door. Sometimes the back. Once, against the side of the house near the bedroom window. I started sleeping with the lights on. I stacked furniture in front of the doors. Still, the knocking came. Then one night, it changed. Instead of knocking, I heard the doorknob turn. Slowly, carefully, as if whoever was outside didn't want to make noise. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, listening to the soft click of the handle moving back and forth. Then it stopped. A few seconds passed, and then a voice spoke from just outside the door. "I know you're awake." It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It sounded calm, familiar, somehow. I didn't respond. The voice sighed. "I just want to come in." The footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I packed a bag and considered leaving, but something stopped me. I felt watched during the day too, like the woods behind the house were paying attention. I kept catching movement between the trees that vanished when I looked directly at it. That night, I sat in the living room with all the lights on, determined to stay awake and face whatever was happening. At 2:31 a.m., the knocking started. Not on the door, on the walls, all around the house. Slow taps, moving, circling, like fingers tracing the perimeter. I stood in the middle of the room, shaking, as the sounds grew closer together. Then everything went silent. The front door creaked open. I stared at it, frozen. I was sure I had locked it. The door opened just a few inches, then stopped. Something breathed from the other side. "Thank you," the voice whispered. The lights went out. When they came back on, the door was closed. Locked. The house was empty. I left the next morning and never went back. A week later, my aunt called me, confused. She asked why I'd unlocked the back door before leaving. I told her I hadn't. She paused, then said, "That's strange. The back door only unlocks from the inside." I still don't sleep well. Sometimes, around 2:30 a.m., I hear a soft knock on my apartment door, on my bedroom wall, on the inside of my head. 3 slow taps, waiting for me to answer. I started finding the notes in my apartment a few weeks after my roommate moved out. At first, I thought he was messing with me. We didn't part on bad terms, but he had a weird sense of humor, and the timing lined up just well enough for it to make sense. The first note was stuck to the fridge with a magnet, written on a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. "You should close the window at night." I stared at it for a long time before checking the windows. They were all closed, locked. I crumpled the note and threw it away, telling myself it was probably left over from my roommate, something he forgot to clean up. 2 days later, there was another note. "Don't sleep with your back to the door." That one was on my nightstand. I knew for a fact it hadn't been there when I went to bed. I checked the apartment, every room, every closet. Nothing. No signs of a break-in. No missing items. I changed the locks anyway. The notes kept coming. Always short. Always written in the same uneven handwriting. Sometimes they were warnings. Sometimes they were observations. "You hum when you're nervous." You forgot to lock the bathroom window tonight. You check the hallway mirror too often. I stopped sleeping. I started leaving lights on in every room. I set up a camera in the living room, then another in the hallway. Every morning, I checked the footage. Nothing. The notes still appeared. One night, I stayed awake in bed, pretending to sleep, barely breathing, listening. Around 3 a.m., I heard the faintest sound. Paper sliding against wood. I kept my eyes closed, heart racing. Then I felt it. The mattress shifted. Just slightly. Like someone sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The weight lingered for a few seconds, then lifted. A soft footstep retreated. The bedroom door closed silently. In the morning, there was a new note on my chest. You did very well tonight. I left the apartment that day and stayed with a friend. I didn't tell them everything. I couldn't. I tried to convince myself that once I left, it would stop. It didn't. The notes started appearing in my car, on my desk at work. Once, folded neatly inside my jacket pocket. You shouldn't run. You're safer when I can see you. The last note came yesterday. It was stuck to my bedroom mirror in my new place. You forgot something. I don't know what I forgot. I don't know what it wants. But every night now, when I lie down, I make sure I don't turn my back to the door, just in case it's watching. I started getting phone calls from my own number about a month ago. The first time it happened, I was brushing my teeth before bed. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter, and when I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. The caller ID showed my name. My number. I assumed it was a glitch, maybe a spam call spoofing my contact info. I let it ring. It stopped after about 10 seconds. No voicemail. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 11:58 p.m. This time, I answered. There was no greeting on the other end. Just silence. Not dead silence, there was a faint background noise, like air moving through a room. Hello, I said. I heard a soft click, and the call ended. I laughed it off and went to bed, but I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking I heard my phone vibrating even when it wasn't. The third night, the call came earlier. 11:12 p.m. I answered immediately. This time, I could hear breathing. Slow. Controlled. Close to the microphone. That's not funny, I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. The breathing paused. Then a voice spoke. Why do you always lock the door before checking the windows? I felt cold all over. That was my habit. I'd done it for years, without thinking. I never mentioned it to anyone. Who is this? I asked. The voice didn't answer. The call ended. I checked my call logs. The call showed as outgoing. From me. I stopped answering after that, but the calls didn't stop. They came every night, slowly getting earlier. Sometimes they rang for minutes. Sometimes they stopped the moment I picked up my phone, like whoever was calling knew. Then the voicemails started. I'd wake up to notifications and find recordings that were just a few seconds long. At first, it was silence. Then faint sounds. Footsteps. A chair creaking. A door opening. Sounds from inside my apartment. One voicemail was longer than the rest. I heard myself breathing. Not recorded through the phone. Breathing the way you do when you're asleep. I didn't recognize when it was recorded, but I knew it was me. I went to my service provider. They couldn't explain it. There was no evidence of call forwarding. No duplicate SIM. No suspicious activity. According to their system, all the calls originated from my device. I stopped bringing my phone into the bedroom. I left it charging in the kitchen at night. The calls still came. One night, I woke up to the sound of my ringtone. Not from the kitchen. From beside my bed. My phone was on the nightstand. I hadn't brought it there. I stared at it as it vibrated, my number glowing on the screen. Slowly, I answered. This time, there was no breathing. Just my voice. Calm. Quiet. Speaking slowly. You keep missing it, it said. I only exist when you're not paying attention. What are you? I whispered. A pause. Then, I'm what stays when you hang up. The call ended. I didn't sleep after that. I sat against the wall, watching the phone like it might move on its own. In the morning, I checked my call history again. There was one outgoing call I didn't remember making. Duration, 6 hours. Last night. I moved out a week later. New place. New locks. New routine. I changed my number yesterday. Tonight, at 11:58 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown caller. I answered without thinking. There was a familiar pause. Then my voice spoke softly from the other end. Why did you think changing numbers would matter?